welcome to the knowledge session of Cut the Fluff with Creator Catalyst. I hope we have the chat up and everything. First time on this platform, so I am trying to make sure everything works well. And my name is Michael Slabodnick, and I'm going to be covering some content I actually did at the Knowledge 25 conference. But when it comes to finding some content to talk about, this is something I'm very passionate about in terms of bringing together human-centered design with application development on the ServiceNow platform, and really answering a few questions of how do we get value out of building things and doing things. And I'm going to talk more about kind of the whys of that as well. And I know I got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to go pretty quick with the content. There is a good amount, and I want to get to the good stuff as well. But before we really go any further, if you look me up, I work for ServiceNow as a solution consultant. I first started working on the platform in 2011, where I met Jace Benson. He was kind of my Obi-Wan in terms of, introducing me to the platform as I was working on it. And he was a key participant in our gamification project we did, where we built a game system for the service desk in 2011. And that was my claim to fame. I'll let you read more about me. LinkedIn QR code. If you're an OG ServiceNow person, there's a QR code there for a nice little surprise if you may remember some of my blogging posts back in the day. But ultimately, I've been on the platform for a very long time. I'm a ServiceNow employee. I always like to find new ways we can leverage the platform. And a lot of the content you're going to see here came from my experience when I was working with the App Engine team and looking at how we can help customers understand not just building, but also how to know what to prioritize and build with that as well. So, I want to put together really just the idea that, hey, we want to have a quick and simple human-centered design and agile methodology in this methodology I call Creator Catalyst. Biggest thing is getting to the how of any problem. And I'm going to address, especially when it comes to AI here in a few minutes. And then also leveling up your developer game. And by the way, this really isn't just for developers. This is for business analysts, admins, anyone who's really trying to say, how can we help get more out of the platform itself? So I'm not going to be talking about AI and how to get started with AI or anything like that. At the end of the day, the way that I see ServiceNow, going to Uncle Fred as the founder here, is the fact that ServiceNow was architected and built as an enterprise application platform. So to me, AI is just helping to enhance everything. It doesn't change the core platform. So I know we're talking about being the AI enterprise platform, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, we've always been the enterprise platform. AI is a new thing that's going to get embedded with it. And that still doesn't change, to me, the reason why ServiceNow as an architecture and technology has been successful. And I love this image. I just threw this in here today, in fact, an hour ago, because I always believe in doing everything last minute. However, I don't believe it being called last minute. I believe in it being called just-in-time delivery. That being said, this is a great, great segue into the whys, because people are trying to answer these questions, and all too often you get these situations where, hey, we all need AI, we all need cloud, we all need this, we all need that. And it's like, great, what do you want it to do? And it's, I don't know, but we want it right now. And once again, this is where I really look at Creator Catalyst as being that part to say, well, if we apply human-centered design with agile development, can we build quickly, and can we get to solutions faster? And I've seen customers be successful with this. I've helped them be successful with this. And so it's really helping those answer those questions of, we have no idea where to start. We know we need to fix something. We don't know what. We know ServiceNow can help us. It's a very powerful platform. But a lot of people don't. A lot of organizations, are still sometimes trying to figure out the best way to approach it. And so, the way that I look at it is to say, great, Creator Catalyst, in terms of what I've put together, is designed to be almost like a build sprint, where we want to focus on a smaller audience of stakeholders. So typically the people who are doing that workflow and having challenges. We want to, focus on that small stakeholder input, so we don't get too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, and end up with scope creep. And a big part about it is also prototyping and building throughout the process as well. Great thing with ServiceNow being a low-code, no-code platform, it makes it much faster and easier to do that. With AI, it's even happening faster. And I just saw a post from one of my App Engine colleagues who I worked with, Mark Morias, where I think he had information that now the personal developer instances, I believe, are now getting like a freemium um, builder agent with it as well. So hopefully get to your personal developer site, check it out. And we're just trying to use AI to build faster. But once again, at the end of the day, we're still trying to solve the business problems we have. It doesn't matter if you're using AI. It doesn't matter if you're solving for AI. We're just trying to get these answers. So to me, this is great. Great approach. Doesn't matter if it's AI or what. Um, but also, we want to get that stakeholder problems and things they describe over to reality. And an MVP is what I'm going to strongly emphasize. We are not trying to boil the ocean. In fact, oftentimes the output of creator catalyst sprints, as I call them, is roadmap to say, here's next things we're going to work on. And we want to get something in place faster and sooner to get the value out of it. And it's like the typical agile scrum methodology. So that is not new. What is new, though, is the human-centered design approach. And I think we all do that. We all kind of know it's there, but sometimes getting it on paper with like a stepped process or workflow is what is going to help make things a reality. And I think this is what I found a lot of my customers are missing. So finally, the good stuff. 3 main steps with this. Understand the problem. Understand the pain points. Everyone will say that. We all know it. The question is how. Creating together, which is what Agile talks about a lot, but we're trying to do it more in a sprint fashion of actually writing on paper, so to speak, to say, yes, we are working together. And then the validation. A lot of the designers I work with people who do human-centered design like to do prototyping and using prototyping apps. Once again, because ServiceNow is a no-code, low-code platform, you can oftentimes prototype in ServiceNow almost faster than you could on a wireframe. And to me, that's a big value piece to this puzzle, where you're able to go through and get closer to your MVP through the prototyping, and you're not now shifting from a wireframe over to an actual solution. And a typical timeline in terms of when I've run these before is some pre-work in terms of just getting some kind of scope in terms of defining here's our problems we're going to go ahead and look at, getting our timeline set, and more importantly, getting the stakeholders involved and identifying who's going to be working with it. And keep in mind, stakeholders are not necessarily the decision makers or people who set the budgets. These are the people we want who are really doing the workflow. They're the ones who can articulate, here's the pain points that we're having in this workflow. And I'll talk about pain points later on. And then the workshop itself is usually a 2-day together. You could do it virtually. You could do it in person on site. On site usually works best, but with tools like Miro, for example, virtual collaboration works great. And it is doing that combination of understanding the current state and then brainstorming future state. And the brainstorming is the key part where we have to get more creative in our innovation. And I'm going to talk about that in detail here in a few minutes, or less than a few minutes because I don't have a lot of time, but we'll get to it. And then the 3 to 4 weeks post collaboration is that constant reback, reiterate kind of thing, where we're doing an initial demo or review to say, answer that question of, hey, did we really solve the pain points of the problems? And wrap up is oftentimes then finishing off the final MVP and getting it in production. And that can look like just continued work. If you're part of a team that maybe is focused on the design portion, maybe you're handing off to a development team. The biggest thing is making sure it does have a correct transition for ultimate deployment. And, step 1 is about knowing the goal, setting that timeline. Like I said, I like to break it to 4 to 6 weeks, scope the deliverables, and I say as best you can, because oftentimes through the human-centered design process, you find more things that are more important. Scope creep is real. But more importantly, agree on goals. And the goals are not, we're building an application to, generate a PowerPoint as part of a report. That is a technical capability. The goals are more things like, we have a team of service desk agents and we want them to be able to resolve tickets faster or incidents faster, or we want them to be able to get answers faster to their users or customers they support. And so it should always be in the context of the people doing the work and how we're trying to make their work better. And that's a different shift when we get out of technology. Um, I always talk about understanding ServiceNow from a capability perspective and technical perspective. So that can involve, if people are going to be involved, they need like a primer on ServiceNow. And then, confirming the logistics and on-site food is very important in my opinion, who's going to bring it. And then setting the expectations at each stage of a deliverable. That way people are clear in what to expect and why they're getting that kind of output. And the step 2 from this, and this is where we start to get into the workshops, is defining the user personas. Who are the stakeholders involved in the workflow? Now, keep in mind, these are user personas. These are not roles, job roles, or titles. These are, Michael's a service desk agent. He has to handle incident management, but he's also working on request fulfillment. Here's the type of things he's doing. So these personas are designed to be descriptive of the people who are really working the workflow. In this screenshot here, yeah, exactly. Gets people all over with thinking they are roles. That's very true. This screenshot here is when I worked with University of Wisconsin, and we did a lot of on-site, same methodology to do the EMR Help product. So if you don't know, the EMR Help, that is an integration with Epic, I actually built with the University of Wisconsin-Madison as part of an engagement similar to this. And so we defined our personas to say there's a clinician, which is typically a nurse or a doctor. There's a Epic support person, which is usually an IT, and listing out, here's the things they're trying to do in Epic, and more importantly, the pain points of these personas, and we're going to get that here shortly. So the next part is, once we have the personas of here's people doing something, the next step is to say, well, what does it look like in their day-to-day workflow? And if you say day-to-day workflow, it is very open-ended. So we have to narrow it down into defined use cases. In this kind of example, or if I talk about University of Wisconsin-Madison with the Epic integration, we were going through and saying, okay, in a typical workflow, when someone goes through and has to chart and they come across an error in Epic, what does it look like today? And it's also important to emphasize, workflow is not process. To me, processes are predefined enterprise steps that have to take to get some kind of output. They are formal, they're defined, usually. Of course, we all know they're not oftentimes. But they are basically trying to say, here's an input in one step and here's an expected output. Workflows include process, but in my vernacular of it, it also includes the things I need to do a step of a work of a process. So this could include, I'm going to Microsoft Excel and putting something in. I'm swivel chairing to ServiceNow and taking that data and putting it in. I'm going to this and doing that. And it is very human-centric to describe a workflow. Process is part of it. Often we start with the process and then we build off of that to describe the workflow. But it is very user-centric of what am I doing truly doing from A to B to get things done. And this is where the personas really come in, because we want to define the pain points. We want to say, hey, the clinician has an error message in Epic. They then have to pick up the phone and call someone. That's taking time away from them. They're trying to give information. Well, if you've ever worked in a hospital, most of the time those clinicians, they just want to say, come and fix it and hang up, and they move on with their lives. And it's the type of thing we're specifically calling out the pain points from each persona and what they do not like about that process. And this is one of the most critical steps. Step 5 is coming up with the solution. And this is where things often fall, I want to say, hit brick walls with when it comes to innovation. Because oftentimes when we start to brainstorm and say, okay, how can we fix this? Someone will say, hey, why don't we use a cloud technology to record the issue? And someone will invariably raise their hand and say, sorry, we can't do that because of X. I've been in many meetings before historically in my career where someone says, we can't do this because of this reason: security, policies, technology, whatever. And if you've ever been in those meetings, everybody goes silent. All innovation stops. Suddenly, it's like the winds are taken out of the sail. At this point, when we're brainstorming, I always say it is a perfect world. Anything's on the table. And if someone says we can't because of X, I tell them, and I've done this in meetings very politely. I've said, zip it. This is not the time. There is a time. Now is not it, because we are trying to maintain that free thought of innovation. And this is where really the good stuff comes in. Once we kind of have those crazy ideas in place, this is where we do the level of effort versus value. And this is where having an architect or someone who understands ServiceNow is incredibly valuable. And I'm sorry if someone is just taking a ServiceNow admin course, they're not the person for this. We are talking about people who've been on the platform for years, plural. They know the ins and outs of ServiceNow, and they can tell you how to solution. Myself being included, Jace Benson, Chuck Tomasi, all those people. And what we do is we have a scale. We say, hey, how valuable is solving this thing to you, customer or organization? And then someone who knows ServiceNow can say, here's the level of effort. And this is where you start to say, we can't do something because of X. Because now that we're throwing in the reality of what we can and can't do and understanding the level of effort, we get that quadrant, if you will, where there's one that says low level of effort, high value. That's your low hanging fruit right there. The other quadrant of high value, high level of effort, that's maybe to do later. Low value, low effort, that's do much later. And then of course, low value, high effort, we're probably never going to do this. This is the step everyone's trying to get to. And if you can get to this, you're phenomenal. Because now that quadrant of high value, low effort is your low hanging fruit. That's your MVP. I think in this example, I took it a little further and I kind of put another column to say, okay, what's realistic, given policies and stuff, because the ServiceNow world, things can be easy, but in an organization, there could be reasons why it's not easy. So this is building to that MVP stage. And then once we can understand and identify that low hanging fruit, here's what we do. We map out that future state. What does this look like for the future? And ultimately, now we're getting into, great, let's prototype it. And once again, with AI now, as far as building low code, no code, you can prototype very quickly. And that's the very valuable part of ServiceNow. So here's the steps in terms of what you're doing. And it seems kind of simple. We all do some form of this, but it's really blown my mind that I've worked with customers where we just take them through step by step. And I think the biggest challenges we've run into is just people understanding to say, hey, we need to define those personas of people. We need to identify those pain points, because that's truly saying, here's what's really going to fix it. And then the prioritization piece, which we have here as well, is critical, because oftentimes what's critical to one person is not critical to another. And when you get together and talk about it, you realize, oh, you know what? This piece that I thought was critical to me is low priority because we have to do this other piece that is a high priority. This is what we solve for. More often than not, when we start these kind of exercises, people go in thinking our priority should be X, and they come out with like, wow, we were way off. Priority should be Z, and we can do that much faster and easier than we thought. Once again, it's that prioritization, that persona defining that gets you there. And like I said before, the critical step for the ServiceNow architect is a big challenge, because what I have found over the past few years especially is that expertise of people who really know ServiceNow are high architects level, master architects. Unfortunately, with what we have for pay scales nowadays in a lot of organizations, usually that's like a manager, senior manager, maybe even a director level of pay level. But those architects and talent are not people who may have reports. So that's where I strongly recommend bringing in partners and being able to help you with that. There's a lot of partners out there who focus on human-centered design. So big takeaways, keep it simple to an MVP. I love good enough today is better than perfect 2 weeks from now from Bill McDermott. Knowing the platform is huge, investing the time to understand and know, and talk it with the community. There's so many people out there who can help give guidance on there, just if you spend 15 minutes with them. Focus on the pain. To me, it's all about the pain point of the users is what's going to help understand the pain point of the organization of why they're not getting something out of it. And then the consistent iteration. One of the smartest people I've ever known, and my mentor, Jake Dunmeyer, look him up, brilliant guy. He always said, I can guarantee with 100% accuracy, it'll not be 100% correct the first time. So know that if you do the iterative approach, which Agile recommends, this is not new, get stuff out there right away and get the value. If you're spending weeks and weeks on things, months, hey, that's great. It's not going to help you till it's out there. And I know we're past time, 5 minutes past time, a lot of great content, but here's some recommended, additional content out there. Design Thinking Playbook is a book that I love. The Horizon Design System from ServiceNow, which I think a colleague of mine, AJ Siegel, has helped grow out as well. And then the Knowledge User Experience Studio, I think, was something we had in Knowledge as well to help with a lot of that. Other great resources, and the design system I think is phenomenal. I just love this mashup. AI created this. I'm not smart enough, but I just love messaging from Bill. People focused. I'm a Star Wars nerd. I'll show you the tattoos another time. But thank you very much for your time. I hope you got something out of this. Some good content. Hopefully you got the QR codes. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm answering most messages. I know Jace. We got podcasts together, all that fun stuff. So enjoy the rest of the content. A lot of great, smart people out there. Learn a lot. Are there any questions? Great session. Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. If you have any questions, throw it in chat. I should be online for the rest of the time, which I know we're running low on. Yeah. And like I said before, this is applicable across everything. So to me, if you're having that moment where you're talking about AI, but you don't know where to get started, this is where you get started to me. All right. Well, we are going to wrap up. Enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you.